Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Belvoir Enfield and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit belvoir.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com.
This week on Your Lettings Journey, Ramesh and I are talking to local landlord and property investor Paren Shah. We find out what got Paren into property to start with, and as both Ramesh and I have worked with Paren in the past, we get to understand a little bit about what he was doing with property before and what he plans to do next and his general plans for the future. It's interesting stuff and very different to our first landlord interview last week with Denny Adam. Worth a watch.
Okay, so hello, welcome to Paren Shah, local landlord, who both Rachel and I have worked with over the last few years. Thanks, Paren, for coming on.
Welcome to be here.
Great. So we were going to hopefully ask you a few questions about your landlord journey, really. So shall we let's get straight into it, really. So tell us a little bit about your history in property and how you first got into property.
Okay. My name's Paren Shah. I've been in property for the last 22 years. Over the period, I've obviously bought some, sold some, and currently I have got 3 properties in my personal name with my wife, 1 in a limited company, and I have 7 rent-to-rents. I started my journey as a hobby. I thought that I needed something to top up my income. So I thought property was the best way to do it, and saved up a little bit of money to buy my first property. It was many moons ago, and it was a 2-bedroom ex-council property in Mill Hill East for a measly amount of £105,000.
Wow. How much would that be worth now? I should be telling you that, but how much is that worth now?
I actually don't know. I think it's probably close to 275, 285, maybe just under 300. Council properties were really good in the time because they were built solid. You know, they were solid brick walls, proper piping, and that is why my first property was a council property.
Mm-hmm. Do you still have it, or you've sold
I
that
sold
in
that
this?
one. I sold my flats now. Service charges are getting a bit too high. Being an ex-council property, the council still had a say in what works was going on, and the bills were escalating every year. So I thought it'd be better to move my money into a house, which I have control over the expenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I remember many moons ago, Paren, I used to work for a council, and every cycle, every 5 or 10 years, they'd issue a major works demand of like 10, 15, 20,000. And I guess you had to be lucky to be a landlord that had bought just after someone had spent all that money, and then you get a run of 5 or 10 years or whatever. But eventually, I guess it would catch up.
It does catch up, yes.
Yeah.
So when you bought this property, or before you even started, what was your plan in terms of getting out? So you wanted to make some money, but what was your plan for the end of it? What's your exit strategy?
I didn't have an exit strategy. What I did know was I was going to use the first property while the value was going up to remortgage and repurchase more and more properties. So as I bought it 22 years ago, property prices were increasing. And then when it came to the renewal, my mortgage broker, the first question I asked him was, what's the most you can get me out of this property? And from that, I actually bought a second property. So my first property was 100% mortgage. My plan was to actually live in it, but we decided to stay with my parents for a bit longer. Mm-hmm. And since I was renting out, I remortgaged it and pulled out enough money to buy a second property. So I'm exit strategy. Don't have one at the moment. I still want to accumulate a few more properties.
You don't have one now? You don't have an exit strategy now?
I do have one right now for my personal properties. My personal properties, thanks to Section 24 with the loss of interest relief, I'm selling all my properties in both mine and my wife's name and shifting them over to other areas outside of London, where I'm getting a considerably higher yield.
Okay, so your 4 properties, the 3 with your wife and then one on your own, they were all properties inside London, were they? All private?
They were all within a couple of miles of where I live. So I didn't do any research. My initial thought was I just wanted properties that would make me a little bit of money, because I was trying to build capital assets. So I wasn't too concerned about the mortgage rents that was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought them close to my home, and that way I could manage them. Hindsight, I would have done it completely differently. I would have probably started this strategy I'm doing now a lot earlier, and I would have been in a different place if I know now what I know previously.
Something like that.
Yes.
Okay, so you said you wanted to manage them yourself, but ultimately, if I'm right, you didn't manage all of them yourself. So was there a big reason for the difference there, that some were managed and some were not? Or
so at the beginning I was managing them all, and then for some reason I always used to get phone calls from tenants on a Saturday night when I'm with my family having a meal. So I'm out with my family having a meal, and the phone would ring, and I'd have a look at it, and it'd be a tenant, and it'll be like, the kids would go, "Dad, what are you doing?" I went, "I've got to pick it up. I'm managing these properties. I have to service my customers." And then I took a conscious decision saying, right, I do make enough money, but I don't want to be wasting my time managing these properties. So when it came to renewals, and when the tenants left and the agent came back in, I said, "You manage it. I'll give you the extra percentages because I want my freedom." And the freedom is that I'm a very hands-off investor. So I let the agent take care of everything. They'll give me a call if they need to do anything. I give them permission to do all the works. And I tend to use the agent's recommendation. I do have some builders, but I prefer the agent to bring in their team. That way I don't have to manage my team and the agent.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, Paren, I think your journey is quite typical of many landlords when they start out self-managing, and then over time they realise that it works and they know what they're doing, but they also value their own sort of personal life, and then they want to sort of step back a little bit, and it's working financially. So yeah,
and it's also the agents or the experts. They have everyone on a call, so they'll know a locksmith straight away. They'll know a plumber straight away. They'll know an emergency electrician. Me trying to find someone and then trying to negotiate, it's just a hassle. So if an agent gets the phone calls, I don't get the phone calls. It just makes my life easier. And at the end of the day, it's about, you're going into making a second income, but if it's going to be stressful, then what is the point? So if you need to be able to balance out, you're making extra money. Yes, you're paying an extra, a lot of people say, but you're paying, whatever percentage, 10%, 12% plus VAT. That's a lot of money. I went, well, not in the grand scheme of things, because you're still, if you've done the figures right, you're still making money. So, yeah.
Yeah. The landlord we had on last week, so Denny Adam, he said exactly the same thing. He said that managing was a headache, and he was quite happy to give that headache to somebody else in terms of those calls. And I think it does come down to your time. And it's interesting because there's also a lot of people who they only have 1 or 2 properties. And unlike yourself, where you want to gain more and more knowledge because you have plans, they're very much just 1 or 2 properties, and that's all they will ever have. And yet, so they're managing things, but actually they don't really know what it is that they don't know, and they're not actively going out to get that information. So very quickly, before we move on to your rent to rents, which I really do want to come back to, as I understand it, you have done a lot to educate yourself about property.
Yes. So my education route was I had a heart attack 2 years ago, and as a blessing, I started running. And because I started running, I got bored of running because I don't really like running. So my wife actually suggested that I should do a podcast while I'm running, which was the best advice I've ever had. And I'm a man of efficiency. So if I'm going to listen to something, I want to be educational. That would help me in the future. So taking a couple of seconds, I thought, well, let me learn something on property. I did a search and I found Simon Sushi, the Property Magic podcast. And I did end to end running. So I was running, I was getting fit, I was getting my heart healthier, and I was learning all about property. And the podcast was amazing. He literally tells you everything about it. And that is when I had the epiphany of, I'm doing it all wrong. I'm not wasting my time, but I could be using my resources a lot more efficiently if I move them around and started investing in different ways rather than doing what I'm doing and earning it wasn't even an income. It was a part-time hobby. So it was just, it just filled a void. But now I'm consciously making decisions where I will be able to become financially free in about 2 or 3 years' time.
Wow.
Okay. And you've also, if I'm not wrong, stopped your day job. So you're not. So this is more than a hobby now. This is.
Yes, I've taken a bit of a career break, and I'm spending a bit more time doing more education. So I've done a few more courses with Simon Zucchi, and I'm doing a lot more YouTube videos and just networking with other property like-minded individuals. And I am spending more time shifting things around so I can spend more time at home with the family and less time working.
Okay. So do you think you will go back to full-time kind of employment, or do you think property is going to be it?
No, I think it won't be full-time. I will go back to work. And the simple reason is I quite like to be around people. And being at home when all my friends are all working is quite a lonely life. So therefore, I will probably go back and find a part-time job. I'm also doing financial charity roles. So, I'm a treasurer of two charities, which, helps them, helps me, keeps my mind active. But yes, I will probably go back part-time I was an accountant. So being an accountant, you can always find a part-time job, being a financial controller or working as a bookkeeper or helping, small businesses.
Yeah, it's amazing a number of people from finance and IT who move into property. Okay, so you were selling up your London properties, or I think you said you were selling those. So what is the next step? What is the plan?
So after doing the course, I actually realized that my single lets are earning me considerably less compared to what the investment I've had in them. And so I'm moving. Well, I bought one last year, which was an 8-bedroom HMO up in Liverpool, which earns me considerably more than my studio flat I had just around the corner, which I think Ramesh knows all about.
Yeah, we used to manage it.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. And was that the same amount of money, though? Did you take the money from that sale?
Yes. So if I give you the figures, which might make it easier, I had a studio flat, which was a tiny property, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a sitting room / bedroom. Once I sold it, I had about £77,000 worth of money come back to me. So this is all the money that I effectively had invested in this property. Adding an extra £10,000, so bringing it up to 88,000. I bought an 8-bedroom HMO. So the 88,000 was my deposit, my legals, my solicitor's fees, my searches and everything. So all in all was 88,000. I went from £800 rent in a studio flat, which actually gave me a profit of £400. But because of Section 24, I only got £300 because obviously 40% tax on the interest that you weren't allowed to claim.
Mm-hmm.
And that was without any extra bill. So if there was a boiler that went or anything like that, that wasn't included in that.
Mm-hmm.
I went to an 8-bedroom HMO, which has a rent of £2,400. After all the costs, that's mortgage, management fees, insurance, cleaning, internet, bills, I clear £1,000. So using effectively the same amount of money, an extra £10,000, I went from 400 to 1,000.
And that's fully managed by a local agent there.
That is fully managed, hands off. And I'll be honest, I didn't even see the property for the first year. I bought it from looking on a website. I spoke to the agents who were managing it and they were selling it. I said, right, the next time someone goes around, can they do a live video? I did a live video. I just clocked onto things I was seeing, like the fire alarm, the security doors, the fire doors. I thought, well, this looks like a well-managed HMO. And I purchased it for £250,000.
Oh, 250,000. Wow, that's a massive difference to here. But
And the benefit I found was HMOs, there are eight residents. So even if one of them leaves, I've still got 7 paying me rent. With a single let, when they leave, I have nothing for 2 to 3 months while I'm renovating and while you're renovating and getting ready for the next tenants. Here, it's a constant rollover. Yes, you do have the odd movement of tenants, but there is always at least 6 to 7 people in there.
That is a massive mind difference, though. I mean, even forgetting the money, the difference between going from a small property that is round the corner from where you live that you can look at, you can go touch, feel, what have you, to and that's easy to understand, to something that for a lot of people is not something they come across very often. And it's a good 3.5 hours drive away. And you're using an agent and it's already got people in it that you don't know. Did it feel like a big leap?
Obviously, there's an element of risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk that you could have really bad agents. There's a risk that you could have really bad tenants. However, I went with the model that everything in life is a risk. If you're going to go into property, there is always an element of risk. You could get the nicest property in London or the nicest property near your house. The agent could do the most in-depth checks on the tenants that are moving in, and they can still wreck it. So there are swings and roundabouts. If you're going to be in property, you have to realize that there is always going to be an element of risk. There is always going to be the maybes. And I'm the type of person that I when I speak to people about my property journey, I quickly gauge if they're going to worry about it at night, then I say it's not for you. I don't worry about the properties. They are managed. If anything happens, I know the agents are looking after it. They're looking after my best interest most of the time. And yes, you do hear horror stories, but that's trial and error. If you do have a bad agent, then you just have to move on to another agent. If you're going to cry over what's happening, then it's not for you.
I think one very wise thing that you've done there, though, is to get an existing HMO. Because if you don't know an area, and I'm assuming you didn't know Liverpool at all, but if you don't know an area, then you don't know who the likely tenants are going to be, what the market is, that sort of thing. Or if while you're doing a property up, somebody's going to come and break in. So to get something that's already existing and you're talking to the agents who are actually managing that property at the moment does seem to be mitigating that risk quite a bit as well.
So I use it as an education curve. What I did was I knew that HMOs were giving me the best yield. However, I didn't know anything about HMOs. I thought, well, if I try and build a HMO, I'm going to have a lot of pitfalls and I'm not going to have, the right fire alarm system put in. I'm not going to have the right everything put in. Then I'm going to be dependent on the builder to make sure they put everything in correctly. And then once the council come along, they might say, well, you've got it all wrong. This way, I've got a ready-made HMO with ready tenants and I'm learning on the cheap, effectively, because I asked the questions to the agent saying, right, what fire alarm system do we have? So therefore, when I'm ready to move on to actually buying a property and making it HMO, I'm already knowledgeable because I've got one that's ready there.
So how long have you had this property? Sorry, Ramesh.
This will be 1.5 years now.
Paren, I was going to ask you,
Yes.
had you bought that property as just a property, and what would have been the purchase price if it wasn't already a pre-existing HMO, would you think, a comparative property, size-wise?
So compared to the properties, I reckon I paid an extra probably £80,000 more for the property, which, yes, it does sound a lot of money, but I'm based in London. Now, if I want to buy a property out in Liverpool and I want to convert it into an eight bedroom, you got to go through planning, you got to go through the sections, you got to make sure that building controls are correct. Then you got to be on site most of the time to make sure the builder's doing all the work and all the other, everything else that's going around. And I just didn't have the time.
Sure.
I'm not going to go up to Liverpool for every little decision that the builder wants. And I didn't have a trusted team that I could rely on in Liverpool yet. So I'm still learning. And now I've got some wonderful agents in Liverpool, which I trust wholeheartedly. They'll ring me up and say, look, Paren, I think I've just had a boiler put in. And they did say, look, the boiler has gone. We've fixed it twice for you. And the plumber, the gas electrician said, look, it is over 10 years old now. And I know logically, there are going to be costs that come through. And I said, just get it done. And I always say to the agent, what do you put in your house? And therefore I know that it's going to be a decent brand that they put in rather than a lower end.
Sure.
Okay.
And I want something reliable.
So you've got the one. Is it just the one now that you have in Liverpool? Is this your only?
I just have the one, and I have the plans to. So my 3 single lets in Barnet. I am going to slowly every year sell one to use the capital allowances, and move that money up to Liverpool or anywhere else. Well, actually, Liverpool would be my concentration. And I think I'll be able to buy for everyone I sell in Barnet. I have enough equity to buy at least 2 in Liverpool.
Wow.
So you are expanding quite a lot in terms of numbers of actual properties. This seems like this is going to take you into the higher levels of portfolio size. So I'm possibly a little bit risk averse, but there's this part of me that says you need to have an exit strategy, particularly if you're buying HMOs, because that narrows the market that you then sell those onto, provided, if you do that. Yes, Rachel, you're stating the obvious. Thank you very much.
I know. I haven't thought about my exit strategy just yet.
You need to do. You're a financial controller. Come on, you need to do that.
Okay, great. So just sort of changing the subject slightly, Paren, in terms of rules and regulations of being a landlord, I mean, how are you keeping up to date on that side of things nowadays?
Okay, so being a hands-off landlord, I let the agents deal with most of that. And what they do is I've got a really good set of agents. They send me emails on a regular basis of current changes and what's required. But I personally think most of the rules and regulations are valid, and they're just making it safer for the tenants. If you're going to be a landlord, take it seriously. Invest money in the property. Make sure you have the gas safes. Make sure you have the valid electrical safety certificates, because the last thing you want is someone to be injured in one of your properties. So, as soon as an agent says, "Look, this has gone wrong," I'm the first to say, "Just get it fixed." I would never skimp on anything regarding any safety aspects of the property.
Okay, that's interesting.
So when it comes to renters reform, are you behind all of the things that have been mentioned with regard to that? Are you where do you sit on Section 21s and periodic tenancies and landlord database and that sort of thing?
I let the agent deal with most of that stuff. I understand that Section 21 means that evictions are going to be more difficult, but they're all to protect the tenants. But I sometimes we just have to, because like I said, the numbers aren't stacking up. It's either the tenant is evicted or you end up losing the whole property altogether because we can't afford to make the numbers meet up.
Okay. It's interesting. I was expecting you to have very strong and firm opinions on Section 21, just like, no, it needs to stay, blah, 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 blah. And you...
I mean, to be fair,
done
Section
that.
21 does need to stay. Sorry. So in that way, you know, the eviction side of things, there is always going to be tenants that can't pay. There's always going to be tenants who upset your neighbours. The ones I've the ones I've asked to leave this week, after speaking to neighbours, I've been hearing some real horror stories of late night parties, breaking cars, and it's you know, you just don't want that on your conscience, especially with your neighbours.
Wow. Because those tenants were there for a long time.
They were there for 7
weren't
years,
they?
yes.
I think 7 years. So how often, just to put you on the spot, how often did you go visit this property?
I actually last time I probably went was 2 years ago. And that's my fault. I should have been going a bit more often.
But you're not alone. That's one of the things that I hear a lot from self-managing landlords, is that, you know, they seem like nice people. When I've been around, it's been fine, and I just want to let them live their lives. And as long as they're paying the rent and there's no issues, then, you know, I'm happy.
Yeah.
It is something that you hear a lot, unfortunately.
I know. I mean, with hindsight, I should have gone a bit more. I think I should have spoken to them a bit more often about if there's any work to be done. So recently, when I got the keys, I went to see one of my neighbours to just give him my details, saying, look, if there's any issues while I'm here, ring me. And he goes, oh, when are you going to fix the roof? I went, what's wrong with my roof? He goes, have a look at it. And that's when I looked at my roof. And he goes, the very top tile at the very top of my roof is missing. And he goes, I told your tenants about a year ago, and they never once told me. So when I went into the attic, I saw some water damage, and I went, geez, only if they'd told me earlier on, I could have dealt with it.
You could have done something about it. Oh, yes, that turns out to be expensive then. Well, let's not dwell on that.
Even the neighbour said, because I did speak to him, I went, aren't you getting any water come through? And they went, no. But it was just, luckily it wasn't heavy enough rain for it to go down to the bedrooms.
I'm surprised they didn't have any issues when it was snowing, if it had been there for that long.
Yeah.
Because the snow tends to...
Maybe the
so you're
tile
actually quite lucky in that respect.
I am very lucky that way.
The insulation probably soaked it all up.
Yes.
In your loft.
Yes.
I suspect.
Another reason to be insulated. Okay, where are you on EPCs as well? Do you know what your EPCs are for your property? What your ratings are?
When it comes to renewal, I find out my EPCs. I make sure that my houses are efficient, so they've all got double glazing. My last 2 properties that I bought, the double glazings weren't working. So the first thing I did was call the company I use, and had all the windows replaced. All my properties have insulation in the roofs to make sure that they're fine. And before my tenants move in, I make sure that everything's done. So it's the installation, make sure that the windows are all tight, the front doors is sealed, just to make sure that the EPC is good. But the actual number rating,
even with the number
rating, I think I only find that out when I have when it's up for renewal, to see what it's like.
Okay, so are you concerned about the plans to make C the minimum rating, given that I think the average is D at the moment across the UK?
It's going to be, I think it's going to hurt the landlords who have got older properties. Most of mine are fairly new, you know, but if you've got a property which is listed, for instance, or an very old house with wooden windows, yes, you are going to be struggling.
I think the point here, Paren, is that I guess I get the feeling that your headspace is more in Liverpool now, so you have a better return, better yield, and so things like that you kind of take on the chin. While I think nowadays landlords in sort of down London who have a single, or anywhere where you have a single let, the thought of having to upgrade your property from a D sort of E/D grade up, and spending £10,000, bearing in mind the numbers you just talked about earlier, where you can't claim back tax on interest, mortgage interest relief. So for those landlords who are doing single lets are really going to sort of feel it a lot more than maybe you. Maybe your headspace is at Liverpool and a better yield, and you accept that this is an investment you've got to do as part of owning property, you know?
I think that's where my headspace is. It's part and parcel of owning a property. There is always going to be new regulations. You have to keep on top of them. I can see, in a way, why the government's doing it. They're trying to make the houses more efficient rather than boarding the costs onto the tenants for higher electricity and gas costs. But it's also costing the landlords. If a landlord is not, like I said before, if you're a single let landlord and this is your sole investment and you are depending on it, you are going to struggle not only with EPCs but with the licensing. When a tenant leaves, if a tenant ruins the property, and it's heartbreaking when you hear, I know a couple of people who they remortgaged their own personal property for a rental property, and and then the tenant stopped paying them, and it's like they potentially lost not only their rental property, but they lost their house because they weren't keeping up with the mortgages, because they'd, like we said earlier, they'd overstretched because of the low interest rates.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking, actually. Sometimes it's the impact, and then this comes back for a lot of people to the removal of Section 21, the amount of time it takes to go through court to get a property back. When you move Section 21, does it become even longer? The financial impact, particularly, I guess we're focused on this sort of part of North London, but, particularly if you're talking about thousands of pounds, 1,000 plus each month that those arrears are accumulating by. It's just,
and
it's a chunk of money.
It's a big chunk of money for a lot of people. It's a big chunk of money for not just landlords, but even if, even if you're a personal individual and you suddenly lose £1,000 a month, that's a considerable amount of food on your table.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I feel we're dipping now into being very, very depressed about certain things, but I agree, it is all very expensive. It has knock-on effects for landlords and tenants. And Paren's gone again. Seems to be every time I say something depressing. Hello.
Maybe it's a filter.
It's a filter. It is a filter. Rachel's being boring again. Cut it off. Okay. All right. So do you have any big plans? So aside from what you're doing at the moment, do you have like big property plans, or is it gradual growth in various areas?
I think, no, I'm going to be a gradual person. I'm not going to jump into anything major. So I'll do things slowly, steadily. I mean, selling the properties, I'm selling them one by one rather than selling them all at the same time. Just to utilize, the finances. And also, I don't want to be buying 3 HMOs in one go. You do one, you get it settled, you get it working, then buy another one. It is slower. It is, it is a slower case, but it's a long-term road. And as like we mentioned before, I don't have the exit strategy yet, so I'm working towards building the assets.
Next one to work on, I think. But yeah, I think it's a very good point that you get one property, you get that set up, you get your learnings from that, and you feed into the next one, and then things can change along the way. Liverpool's a very interesting area.
Well, I mean, the reason, so when I did the mastermind and I had a mentor session, it was that's when the mentor actually said, concentrate on one area rather than concentrating on. So I said to him, I'm a free agent. I'm going to buy HMOs anywhere that makes it financially viable. And his wise words were, actually concentrate on one area, because every council has different HMO requirements, and to keep on top of all of them will be a lot of work. So that is why I found my first one in Liverpool. I don't know how I found the first one in Liverpool, but I found it, and I'll probably stick to Liverpool for now.
That's interesting, because next week we have Ramesh and I are interviewing a contact of his who's from the HMO licensing company. And I think they do that sort of making sure your property is correctly licensed, and what the local council rules are and all that sort of thing. So that may be one for you to listen into then, Paren.
I will.
Okay. If you were starting again, if you were 20 years younger and you're sitting down to Sunday dinner and you're like talking to your wife, it's like, hello, darling, I think that we should now start investing in property. What would you do differently? What would be the first thing you do?
The first thing I'd do is, rather than invest in the property, I'd invest in myself. So educate myself first of all the property strategies that are out there. Then take a long, hard look at what my risk appetite is, and then find the right property strategy for your risk appetite. So I am a very risk-taking person, and traditionally my property venture was very subdued. It was actually quite, there was very little risk in it. It was local properties, single lets, and actually what I should have been doing was looking at high risk strategies.
That's interesting coming from a finance person, a financial controller saying,
Financial
I like
controller.
high risk.
I'm. Everyone says that. It goes, Paren, you don't seem to be the typical accountant. I'm not. I like to think outside the box, and that is where I try to educate people on being money smart. So how the world of finance works, how the world of loans works, how refinancing works, how to get investors and build. When you're younger, you can take the risks a lot quicker. When you don't have kids, when you don't have a house that you need to supply, you need to make sure there's a roof over your children and your wife's head, then you can take even greater risks, because that is where you can grow quite quickly. But you need the right education. You need the right mentors.
But I mean, having said that, it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, I should have taken more risks. But, you might have taken more risks and not done enough due diligence at that time. So, I always think sometimes
True.
you can't always just look back, too much, because you did the best you could at that time.
We have these conversations at home where people go, "Oh, if I knew, if I had hindsight, I would have put all my money in property." And I said, actually, if you knew that, realistically, if you really knew hindsight, and you could use hindsight, when you bought Google shares and then sold it for Apple shares and then sold it for something else rather than property. But hindsight's something that it's hindsight. You can never go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you say you have a passion for actual property? It's one of those things that the lady I work with, one of the ladies I work with, Kaz, she gets very excited about particular properties. She says there's always something about a property that she will absolutely love. And then she gets a feeling for that property. Do you have any kind of love of property, or is it purely investment for you?
There has been a couple of lovely properties I bought. There was one I bought from a hoarder, and it was in a really, really bad state. When bless him, he had obviously a condition, and when the agent told me, "Look, Paren, he is a hoarder. There is a lot of stuff in his house," I mean, that's fine. I when I buy an investment property, I never look at the floor. I look at the ceiling, and I look at the size of the rooms. So by looking at the four corners of the rooms, you can see how big the room is, rather than looking at the clutter or the whatever the decor is inside. And I found a real gem, and I was really excited. And when I took my kids there first time, I even said to them, if you touch anything in this house, at the flat, you are staying here. And literally they walked around like this. We're not touching anything, because he hadn't cleaned the house for 20 years.
Wow.
And it was a real filthy pit, but I did see past it, and I actually loved it. I said, it's, everything was stripped out, and I flipped it. I rented it for a year, and it was like the highest earning thing I ever did.
You're not interested in flipping in its own right? Is that not something you...
I personally think there's too many people doing it. And like I said, I'm not really good at negotiating with builders. So I end up paying whatever they tell me to pay. And and obviously
Except
I'm
the
always
first
getting stung.
price. Yeah. Okay,
Fair
it's
enough.
interesting. That look up at the ceiling, I think, was it Phil? I heard Phil Spencer saying that as well. I think it might have been him. But yeah, look at the ceiling. Don't look at the floor because you'll get
Yeah, because if you
distracted
look at the
by
floor
stuff.
plans, you see all their items, and their items are all going.
Yeah, and that's when you get tied into people's lifestyle as well. You know, it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily need to be bad stuff. It can just be, you know, pictures of family holidays and that sort of
true.
thing. You get carried away
It's
with
like
it.
me and my wife bought our first flat to live in, and she walked out and said, "We can't buy it." I went, "We can buy it," and her argument was, "But did you see the color of the walls, and did you see the color of the carpets and the cupboards?" I went, "Liquor paint, a new kitchen, new wardrobes, which we are going to get anyway, and it's brand new." And that's when she realized. I went, "Did you see the size of the rooms? That's what you need to look at." And that's when she started looking back and went, "Actually, that's fine." I think I spent maybe £10,000 doing the whole place up, and it looked beautiful.
Does she get involved with you, or is this very much something you do on your own? She doesn't.
Though we're
Okay.
equal partners, I literally there's a running joke. I would just take some papers to her and go, "Can you sign?" And she goes, "What are we doing?" And she goes, "Oh, we're buying a house, or we're selling a place, or we're doing this new strategy, or we're creating a limited company for the new HMO." They went, "Okay, that's fine. As long as you're doing it, you're doing it."
Wow.
Every so often she'll ask a question.
But in terms of actually wanting to drive up to Liverpool with you to have a look around the next HMO, not interested at all.
Not her cup of tea. She's a very successful business woman on her own right, so
Yeah.
she's busy doing her things, and I'm busy doing these things.
Okay. So if you were to talk to an existing landlord, maybe somebody who's got one or two properties and is thinking, I don't know what I would do next, what is the one bit of advice that you would give them?
I would find out what their risk appetite is. Do they want to grow, or are they happy with what they've got? And if they're happy with what they've got, they need to make sure that they are securing it. So if they've only got 2 rental properties, make sure that
It's me, isn't it? I am the kiss of death. Sorry, we are going to have to do that again, Paren.
Okay.
You disappeared. So someone with 1 or 2 properties, landlord with 1 or 2 properties who's sitting there thinking, I don't know what to do next with this, if anything. What would be your one bit of advice that you would give them?
I would ask them what their risk appetite is. Do they want to, if they want to just keep to 1 or 2, I would say, make sure you secure them. Make sure that they are self-funding, that the financing is in place. Make sure that if the interest rates do go up even higher, that you can still afford to do it. And if not, have a contingency plan of what you want to do. And if they want to grow, then have a look at what you have equity-wise in those properties to see if you can release them to buy even more. The power of equity is and releasing and cheap finance is for people who want to scale up.
Okay.
I think the only thing at the moment now is that boat is sort of has sailed, so to speak, a little bit. The ability to refinance now, I think, with the way mortgage interest rates are, we'll have to wait for a few years before they come down.
Yeah, then so you have to be able to have it in you to ride the hard times as well as the good times.
Yeah, landlords tend to be a fairly hardy bunch, but there are a lot more people with just 1 or 2 properties.
If you're an accidental landlord, that's when like I said before, if you're depending on this money, then you've got to do something to secure it. I actually never used any of the money I earned from property. I just kept it, reinvesting it, and did other things with it. I just lived on my own incomes.
Yeah.
Perfect. But do you not want to do something with it? Do you have some master plan of how you're going to spend it and how you're going to enjoy this?
At the moment, I'm in my phase of asset creation. So I will use the money to buy other assets or something that generate money. Keep a simple life at the moment, allowing me to retire earlier and enjoy my life.
Okay. Ramesh, do you have any other questions?
No, I think we've done quite a lot, and also just conscious of time. But thank you, Paren. I've been enlightened.
I have one. Yeah, I think it's been really interesting, Paren. But I wanted to see if you wanted to give a shout out for your. So since you were hospitalised last 2 years ago, you said you were saying about you'd had issues. you've done a lot of work for charity, and I believe you have a ridiculously long bike ride coming up this weekend.
So so I had a major heart attack 2 years ago, and ever since then I've been trying to prove to my friends and family that there is a life after a heart attack. So last year I did my first ever marathon, and this year I am doing the London to Brighton bike ride. It's on the 18th of June, which is actually on my birthday. So I turned 48 on the 18th of June, which is coming up.
And you're
And
celebrating on a bike.
And I'm celebrating doing a bike ride.
Good luck.
Tell me you've got the whole family going with you. That'll make me very happy.
So sadly, my wife is actually on a course, so she's away this weekend. And my daughter's in a production coming up in July, so she's away she'll be practicing on Sunday. So actually, I'm cycling with a friend of mine and my brother-in-law, and that's it. We have no support because everyone else, all our family is busy.
Wow. Okay, so I'm conscious that this will be going live after that, but we'll put the link in the notes anyway, because presumably people can add money, because it's for the British Heart Foundation, isn't it? So
yes, I'm raising money for the British Heart Foundation. Obviously, having a heart attack, they have been crucial to my recovery. They gave a lot of support afterwards, so I'm just raising some funds for them.
Perfect. So if people have enjoyed this episode of Your Lettings Journey, we will leave the link there for donations perhaps after the event as well.
Thank you.
Okay,
perfect.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. Your journey has indeed, or is very interesting, and I'm conscious it's still going. We'll come back to you in a couple of years' time when you're possibly, I don't know, investing in hostels in Skegness or something.
So I did actually speak to a friend of mine yesterday, and she's buying HMO. She's actually found a team in Burnley who buy houses, do them up, and rent them to students. And she goes that the local university has 22,000 students, and their first year they've got amazing halls, but they've got nothing for year 2, 3, and 4. So she's looking into buying a few more there, and the prices are like, she bought a house for 125,000, 6-bedroom HMO she's going to convert it into, which will be worth 200,000 at the end of it. So what she's going to wait for. Sorry?
Is she local to that area?
She lives just around the corner from Rumish's offices. Literally around the corner from your offices. So she's using her, she retired. So she's using the cash that she got from her retirement for this business.
Wow.
So she's going to do the BRR, but she's going to keep it in, she's going to keep the cash in it until the mortgage rate goes down, and then she'll remortgage and do another one.
I think it's great. I think the closer I get to that sort of age, the more I think, I can understand why 30-something% of landlords are pensioners, because it's fascinating to do as a second career, I think. So I hope she does fabulously well. It's also the stress.
It's also stress. I advise a lot of my family not to do it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's something for another day. That surprises me.
It's simple, because when I speak to them, I went, I'll give them the numbers. I went, I have 1.4 million in debt. And they went, how do you sleep at night? I went, that's the reason why you don't do property.
Yeah.
If you're going to worry about the figures, if it's all self-funding.
Yeah.
And on that happy note, I'm going to go to sleep very much happy that I am not 1.4 million a day. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paren. Been very, very interesting. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
No worries.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. See you later.
If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.